The evolutionary hunter gets up every day and wants to drive forward, go out and change things, make things happen. We question the status quo while the rest of the world tries to become average and clings to the status quo. We get up and try and change it and improve things. And we ask the question, how do we make a better future? Then we demand it becomes real.
Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. If you're a millennial looking for actionable advice and a proven formula on how to build the life of your dreams, then this is the show for you. Each week, I'll be connecting with inspiring guests who will be sharing their wisdom on how to reach success. So if you're ready to take your life to the next level, buckle up and enjoy the ride. What is up, team? Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. I'm extraordinarily grateful to have you here today. Today we're joined by guest Alex Charfen. Alex is an entrepreneur in every sense of the word. He's run a number of businesses, written books, spoken to audiences around the world, has led some high-powered mastermind groups, and much, much more. He's also identified that some of history's most accomplished individuals, such as Einstein, Picasso, Edison, and even Oprah, have unique commonalities. He's grouped these commonalities into what he calls the entrepreneurial personality type. It's a very interesting concept, and we go really deep into that in this episode, and what those differences are, and how you can incorporate these things into your own life. We also talk through things such as Alex's epic morning routine, all 4 different personality types that are out there, and how you can accomplish amazing things like some of history's most accomplished game changers. So without rambling on too much, let's dive straight into this episode with Alex Charfen. Alex Charfen, welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast, brother. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be here, Brad. Thank you.
And thanks for dealing with me at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:50 your time on a Friday. So we're thrilled to have you and appreciate the generosity of your time to be here to drop some knowledge bombs.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm usually up a couple hours at this time anyway.
Perfect. Well, actually, so that's an interesting point that you bring up there. I would love to hear a little bit about your morning routine and kind of how you kick the day off.
Sure. So I'm obsessive with morning routine, Brad. Actually, I think if I can share just a little of my background, it'll make more sense as to why I'm so obsessive.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start there and then dive into the morning stuff.
Yeah, because here, I think when people first hear it, they think like, what is he talking about? But here's why. When I was a kid, I was a truly awkward kid. I mean, I'm an awkward adult, but now I have money, so it's eccentric. But I was a truly awkward kid. I was a kid that like when I was walking up, the adults would attenuate the voice. They'd say like, hey, look, it's Brad and Patrick and Jennifer and Alex. And I heard it and I knew, and so from a very young age, I knew I had to figure out how to make the world work for me. And one of the things that I had always had a really hard time with was just getting out of bed and getting to like wherever I was supposed to be on time. And I have 3 younger sisters, so there was a lot of noise in my family's house. It felt like there was always a baby there, and so I was trying to figure things out. And I started my morning routine, or started a written morning routine, right around 10. By the time I was in junior high, I had like a full-blown checklist that I used, and I had realized that the only way that things really worked for me was if I did them the same way over and over again. And here's where that came from. As a kid, I was really obsessed with success because I was so different than everyone else around me. I read self-help books first. And I'll ask you, Brad, have you read some self-help books?
I have, but I'm a late bloomer in comparison to you. I was probably about 24 when I started really getting into it, and that led to the podcast, but I was not even thinking about that at 10 years old. I'll tell you.
Well, let's get into that in a second. So, see, for me, one of the things that was happening in school was I was getting this reflection constantly that like I was not doing well. I didn't do well in class. Socially, I was crazy awkward. I didn't know how to get along with the other kids. I had a hard time figuring out like what I should do to just be. And so I started trying to find books that would explain it. But you've had the experience of reading self-help. Do you know what I mean when I say like, if you read one or two, you start seeing some things you can do. But if you read like 10 self-help books, by the time you're at number 10, 8 and 7 have been validated 2 and 4, and like 9 and 1 are arguing with each other, and 10 basically said all the rest are bullshit.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
You know what I'm saying? And it's so confusing. I remember being a kid and thinking like, who do I trust? Tony Robbins or Wayne Dyer or, Bander and Grindler? And like, fuck, what do you do? And, so I started reading about successful people, and I'm one of those obsessive people that when I start something, I don't tend to stop, but I'm a very slow learner. And so I started reading about, anybody in history that I could remember that meant something to me. And here's what I found. You start reading the life histories of people, and you start seeing like incredible similarities to the awkward kid who doesn't get along with anybody. And I went out to go read about success, and I've read thousands of life histories. When you get to 100, they look different. When you get to 500, you start seeing similarities. You get to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Here's what's clear. Like, we are all the same. Successful people have so much more in common. The great entrepreneurial personality types throughout history have so much more in common than we have different. And one of the things that I saw repeated over and over again was a near compulsive obsession with routine, to the point where it became weird how many people throughout history adopted a daily uniform so that they wouldn't have to make the decision of which clothes to wear, so they could use that brain power somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And so, my
That's
morning
the
routine.
Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, a model right there, right?
It's Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson. You look around you, and there's a reason why these guys wear the same thing all the time. Richard Branson's white shirts, he's got hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. That puffy pirate shirt he loves to wear, like it's hard to see him not wearing that, but you'll notice that he wears it at a formal event. He wears it on the beach. He wears it when he's on his plane. He's got the same white button-up shirt, right? And it's not just recent. You can go back in history. Einstein decided to wear the same thing, because we start realizing that when you simplify the tactics of life, you can start really getting into the strategy of life where you make a difference. And for any of us, once we start feeling that need to make a difference, that's what really becomes important. And so my morning routine is it's written out. It's on a checklist. It has been for 30 years. It's been refined over time. I approach it in an entirely scientific manner by creating hypothesis, testing it, and then taking the results and then improving it over time. It's actually something that I teach to all of my private clients, it's an interesting point to note, Brad, that, I have clients that run multi-million-dollar businesses. They pay us $36,000 a year to be on one call in a group with me each week. And one of the first things we do with entrepreneurs who operate at that level is teach them how to create a morning routine that supports them in the first hour of the day.
Nice.
Yeah. And so here's some of the things that you can do. So, and this is for everyone listening. By the way, Brad, I'm like, I can't tell you how excited I am to be on the millennial mastermind.
It's a mouthful,
yeah, it is. But most of my clients are millennials. And there's this ridiculous market impression today that millennials won't work, or can't focus, or don't want to do things, or haven't shown up in some way that is equivalent to or greater than past generations. Mm-hmm. And every time a business owner stands in front of the room and says something like, "Oh, I just can't stand hiring millennials because they don't work," I want to go up and like tell him, "Hey, you're making yourself look like an idiot." Mm-hmm. Because saying millennials won't work is obscene. See, here's the fact is that millennials won't work for anything that doesn't matter. But if something matters to a millennial, they can't stop working. And I think that, every generation we go through this odd juxtaposition where we attack the younger generation for who they are. But if we would back up for a second and recognize that, I can introduce you to some of my clients. They're in their 20s. They're running multi-million-dollar enterprises. They're changing entire markets. They're modifying how people do business. They're helping not hundreds, but sometimes thousands of people around the world improve their lives, run bigger businesses, and make things happen. And so, I'm excited to be here because I think every listener of this podcast, you're listening to this for a reason. You're just like us. You're one of those people that's driven to change the world, to get up every day and make something happen. And you're willing to expose yourself to the vulnerability, the pain, the frustration, the pressure of being one of those people who's not going to just go with the crowd. And so, I'm excited to be here. And I want to share strategies that will help you create a much higher level of momentum in your lives and a much higher level of success in your lives. So if we get back to the morning routine, Brad, here's like the first thing that I coach any of my clients on, the first thing that we talk about before we talk about business structure, business frameworks, any of those things is hydration. 75% of the world walks around dehydrated. Human beings are the only species in the world that have taught ourselves to sip. Water is the only way to remove toxicity from the body. And the highest rate of water exchange in the body is in the brain. And when we dehydrate, it stops exchanging there first. So staying hyper hydrated all day, more water than you ever thought you could possibly drink will change everything. And it starts in the morning routine, right when you get up, drinking 16 ounces or more of water all at one time.
Wow. So is that just you chugging two straight glasses right in the morning, or one straight glass, big cup right when you get up and walk into the kitchen and having that?
I like that you asked that because I actually don't use glasses. I use a 50-ounce water bottle.
Okay.
And all of my clients do too, because my suggestion is you do that same hyperhydration, and it's anywhere from 16 to sometimes I'll drink as much as 30 or 35 ounces of water in one time. And when you do that, here's what happens. The research on hydration is out there. If you hyperhydrate, one, your metabolism increases 30 to 50% for 2 hours. It's like a workout in a glass. No joke. Two, it causes your body to flush. It causes a circulatory flush, lymphatic flush. Three, it relaxes the upper torso. Like in order to take on that much water, you actually have to relax the torso, and it causes the body to expand and relaxes the muscles throughout the body. And four, here's the feeling, like go do it. Take on 16 ounces or more of water. You will get a chemical high from it. And Brad, when you think about that, the evolutionary hunter that we are, the person that we are every day getting up and going throughout the world, taking on water throughout history has been a way to connect mind and body, to cure disease, to create momentum. And as soon as we invented prescription drugs, it's like we stopped talking about water. And I think there's a reason why. If you look at the top 20 prescription drugs in the United States, and you can go much further down the list, those drugs treat symptoms for just about anything that you can describe in the body. However, they also treat the symptoms of dehydration, because dehydration causes mood swings, depression, stomach issues, pain, inflammation, bloating, heartburn, all of the things that the top 20 drugs address.
That's fascinating. I just took a big sip of water out of my Yeti here.
Well, what happens is once you start drinking or talking about water, you realize you're thirsty.
Yeah, that's 100% what just happened.
So that's a big one.
So what comes then after water?
So, I should pull up the checklist so I can just do it really easily. In fact, I'm going to do that because
okay, I would love that.
Because I'll actually take you through some of the details. And so here's the morning routine. So I get up, I rinse my mouth and clean my tongue because you don't want to take on water with any of the stuff that's in your mouth. I hyperhydrate for the first time. I do a hyperoxygenation, which for me is either a breathing routine or meditation with the Muse headband. I then make a hypernutrition shake, which is more nutrients per calorie than just about any type of food you can get out there. I use a variety of, concentrated foods, dried foods, not a lot of supplementation. I then do planning and solitude, which for me includes getting away from electronics, writing down a start time, reviewing the momentum planner system that we have, which is a system that is based around creating your intention for the day and offloading where you're uncomfortable. So I go through that planning process, which usually takes 12 to 17 minutes. Right when I'm done with that, I assign whatever I can to people who can help me. So if I've made any type of a list during that process, I get a short to-do list and I delegate as much as I can. Then I align with my wife. That starts right at around 6 a.m. Takes us about 10 to 15 minutes. She's also done her planning by then. Then I remind myself to hyperhydrate for the second time in my checklist, but usually it's the third or fourth time. I wake up my kids. We go for a 20-minute walk, at least 20-minute walk every morning. That gets you out of the dopamine cycle, out of an adrenal cycle, out of fight or flight. Physiologically, the morning walk calms the body and gets us into a dopamine cycle. So you can get a legal drug high every morning doing that 20-minute walk. Then I come back from the walk and, because I'm physiologically activated at that point, I sit down and I do anything else in planning and solitude. I give it another look. It only takes me 12 to 17 minutes. So that second look at it, 3, 4, 5 minutes. A lot of the time I get stuff down that I didn't think about before. Then I remind myself to hyperhydrate for the third time. I do whatever workout or exercise I'm going to do that day. I spend time in an infrared sauna. Then I go take a cold shower, do what we call primal foot care. I'm obsessed with the feet and foot care and walking and neurological stimulation and connecting mind and body. So each morning, the foot care process is moisturizing the feet, making sure they're clean between the feet, drying them completely, and then just checking the nails and making sure that there's no additional calluses. And then I'm done with my morning routine.
Nice. Well, yeah, just a few little things in there. So 30 years of perfecting that. And that's a very impressive. So what time does that all get started usually for you?
Typically about 4:30 in the morning.
Okay.
I'm up and yeah.
Well, that sounds like an awesome way to kind of prime yourself for the day. And I think that there's some takeaways there for the audience that maybe they're not going to be able to dive into that entire regimen right off the bat. But there's a lot there to kind of unpack, from the hydration to getting up and moving and doing even just that 20-minute walk to kind of reset your body.
Anybody who wants to try it, I can give you a URL where you can download my routine.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, let me just verify. I think I'll tell you in a sec. But yeah, no, I'll give it to you because, I teach this stuff to high producing individuals around the world. I have clients on several different continents. And, when you take something like this and you study it over the course of 30 years, at one point I worked with Robert Cooper, who's one of the foremost neurologists in the world. We spent 11 months together proving this stuff out. We actually went and did the research of when should you drink? When should you plan? How should you look at it? Neurologically, what's occurring with the body at each point in time? And then we did it again. We went and said, okay, now in our planning modules, like when we're telling people this is how you should plan for your long-term outcomes, this is how you should measure, these are the time periods within which you should measure. We went and verified those things with epidemiological research on human being decision making. We looked at the latest neuroscience. So like the obsession with how this is put together is more than a typical information product. And there's a reason. I've been doing this forever. Mm-hmm. And here's what I know, Brad. Something in your life, the things in your life, the processes, the people, the places, the things, they're either giving you momentum or they're taking it away. And when I put out a product, my goal is that it gives you momentum in the process so that if you're willing to take action up front, things get easier for you immediately. And here's what people tell me when they try that whole blown out crazy morning routine. I get text messages from people. Like I got one from one of my clients yesterday, just like out of the blue. Morning walks are a game changer because she started trying my routine and she's like, man, this is special for me. So now I'm going to keep it. And she's doing the hyperhydration. She's added a few things in for her. if you start with something like my routine, you're going to find that within just a few days, you're finding the places you want to modify. But because we did so much research about how to awaken the body and make the first hour of the day the best hour of the day and fully activate all of the senses, fully activate your presence, your awareness, your ability to pay attention, and your ability to do what you want, I think that anybody who tried it, you're going to see some massive changes. So you can go to morning.charfen.com, and my last name is spelled CHARFEN.com, and you can download my morning routine, and I think there's a couple of other things in there too.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, we'll definitely be sure to link that up in the show notes. So you mentioned the clients that you've worked with, and it sounds like there's been and still are some very, very impressive people who fall into that category. Are there any common themes that you see, common roadblocks, especially that as you're taking on a new client and really with those millennial achievers you were talking about, would be a great direction to go with it as well, that keep coming up, that are just common things that are easily, or maybe not easily addressed, but something that are on the top of the list every time?
Yeah, for sure, Brad. This is not all millennials, by the way. Mm-hmm. This is the millennials that are listening to this podcast. This is the people who are driven to move forward, who want to do something different, who know that there's more for them in the world. Because, Brad, that's not everyone in the world. You know, when you're wired that way, you think everyone else is too. But let's remember that every night at 7:00, there's a show like Wheel of Fortune on TV. And if that show doesn't play, hundreds of thousands of people call the TV station and complain.
I love that you bring that point up, because it was a bit of a shift for me when I realized that once I started doing the podcast, started reading all these books, and was so motivated and started going down this path, it was hard for me to understand how other people weren't. And I found myself starting to recommend everybody around me starts a blog or a podcast or a YouTube channel. And it quickly dawned on me that I was just annoying a lot of people because they had no interest in not just creating content, but doing anything of their own type of business. And so I think that's a key point that you mentioned there.
Well, there's a reason, Brad. People like you and I are different than the rest of the world. And it took you until 24 to figure it out. But I would present to you that that's probably due to the amount of suppression that you experienced as a kid. Because when you look at people like us who ask the questions, I mean, you know, you put yourself in a position where you literally get on the phone with people around the world and ask questions. And we're the people who are inquisitive and want to do more and want to make things better and want to improve the status quo. And the fact is, when you look at the rest of the world, they're just hardwired different than we are. Brad, there's 4 types of people in the world. And the earlier somebody figures this out, the better, especially when they're like us. I'll let you qualify which one you are. So the first type of person in the world, I call them the caretakers. These are the people who want to take care of other people. They want to be able to show up and help people. That's what they're wired to do. And I can disqualify you from this group with one question, Brad. Do you enjoy changing bedpans?
No.
See, you laugh, right? But here, check this out. I've actually talked to people that when I say, hey, do you enjoy changing bedpans? They say, well, Alex, if that person needed it, then yes, it was fulfilling. I feel humbled. I was happy to be of service. And I'm like, holy crap, I would be feeling like I needed to write a check.
Yeah.
So you're not a caretaker. But Brad, can you see how our evolutionary tribe of human beings needed that population?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. So we're not in that group. The second group, I call them the communicators. And these are the people that like to talk. They like to communicate about anything and everything. And I can disqualify you from this group with one question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love small talk? 1 being get me out of the room, and 10 being I can do it any day, all day.
I would say I'd fall somewhere in the middle of that. Maybe like a 5 or a 6.
Do you really think so, Brad? So you like to talk about the weather?
Nah, I don't like it, but I can do it, I guess. I guess it's
so
less
do you like to
of
talk
something
about
I
the game
enjoy.
last night? Even if it's not about Cleveland?
That's a qualifying question right there. No, I would say no.
Right. And when you're at a party and somebody says, oh, I really like your shirt, don't you think to yourself, like, why are we having this conversation?
Yeah.
Okay, so then like let's call it what it is. You're probably a 1 or 2.
All right. Yeah,
because communicators, here's the fact, Brad. Communicators are the people who want to talk about anything, and they do. And like at one point in history, the weather was a relevant conversation. But today, when I walk into a building and somebody says, "Hey, man, it's really hot out there, isn't it?" I think to myself instantly, like, yes, it's hot. We're in a controlled environment. Why are we talking about it? You experienced the same thing I did. We don't need to go outside for a while. Like, this is irrelevant. You know, but communicators, they love it. And now can you see, like, at some point in time, our tribe needed that small group, or sorry, not the small group, but that group that would carry on oral tradition, that would share what's going on. Like, we needed the group that would say, hey, there's a woolly mammoth. There's a cliff. Don't go over there. Don't eat this thing. It kills you.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So now the third group, if we're going to conflict with any group, it's usually this one. I mean, it's all three, but usually it's this one. I call them the coordinators. But coordinators are really, they're like organizers. They're memorizers. They're the ones who love fine print. They're the ones who really enjoy things like committees and associations. And they're the ones who, you know, they don't want to necessarily do the contract to get the deal done. They want to do the contract so that they can do the contract. You know?
That is definitely not me. I can say that without even a qualifying question. But
no doubt. Because like that's as far from people like us as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But did our tribe evolutionarily need those coordinators? Like, did we need somebody to figure out the seasons and to, you know, count up all the days and to figure out the hours in the day and, you know, where to put the stick to make a sundial and all that? Because you know what? Let's be honest. Were people like us going to even pay attention?
Probably not.
Yeah. Because if you look at that evolutionary tribe, you have the people who take care of people, the people who communicate with the tribe and carry on the oral tradition, the people who coordinate, get things in the right order, memorize, organize. Now, who are we missing?
The people who innovate.
Right. Only in an evolutionary tribe of human beings, without all of the technology and luxury that we have around us, the people that innovate would have just hunted.
Mm-hmm.
We are the evolutionary hunters. And Brad, you know that once that light turned on for you, you have not been able to turn it off. And so when you look at how we're wired, we are completely different than the rest of the world. The evolutionary hunter gets up every day and wants to drive forward, go out and change things, make things happen. We question the status quo while the rest of the world tries to become average and clings to the status quo. We get up and try and change it and improve things. And we ask the question, how do we make a better future? Then we demand it becomes real.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at all three other parts of the human species, the communicators, the caretakers, the coordinators, all three of them live fully and totally in the present. And so for any of you who think like us and who qualified yourself as that fourth group, the evolutionary hunter, I want you to understand you have the entrepreneurial personality type, and throughout history, the most successful people in the world have thought the same way you do. And Brad, I'll ask the question, can you turn it off?
No, I think we're a little too far down the road at this point.
Right. And you know, the rest of the world can. You hear people say things like, I just want to take a beach vacation and lay on a chair for 12 hours, and then they do.
Mm-hmm.
People like us take a beach vacation, go out to the chair for 12 minutes, and then go inside and try and make a deal with the hotel to buy it. And it's just who we are, because hunters don't stop. And we're hardwired different.
So my first question on that, Alex, would be, do you think that everybody falls 100% within one of those four categories? Or do you think that some of us are a blend of pieces of those? Because as you talk through it, I totally agree that I fall within that hunter personality type. But I could see how there's people in my life who might have a little bit of that and then a little bit of a communicator in them. But maybe I'm just misreading them. I'd love to get your thoughts.
You know, I have a hard time making rules around it or saying like it has to be, but here's my observations. The evolutionary hunter can be whatever they want to be. In fact, I know evolutionary hunters that on the Myers-Briggs, they're an introvert, but they're public speakers and they go shake hands all day. I know people who, are dyslexic, yet I'm dyslexic. Yes, yet I have about 400 published words. 4 million published words. You go out and look online for my name, you'll see hundreds and in some cases thousands of articles. And evolutionary hunters can take on the characteristics of any one of those groups. In fact, Brad, hasn't somebody in your life at one point said something like, hey, you're kind of a chameleon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you might be surrounded by people just like you and I who can lean into any one of these if they want to and might even have a proficiency in one. But the difference with the evolutionary hunter is our hard wiring. We're future focused. We actually look at the future and want to change it. And that's how I make the differentiation. Because here's what I think, Brad. I think people like you and I don't really understand happy or sad. Now just play with me for a second. I know that sounded a little crazy. But the fact is, happy's on and sad is off. But what's the difference between sad, frustrated, pissed off, ticked off, confused, and just plain not going to talk to you?
It all kind of lumps into a negative mindset, in my opinion.
But is there a difference? How would you treat somebody different if they were confused or frustrated? Or pissed off or ticked off? To me, I can't tell a difference. And here's why. This is my belief, and I've shared this with entrepreneurial personality types around the planet, and they just declare it as truth. People like us aren't wired into this world of emotions, and at some point in time in our lives, usually pretty consistently, we are all told by the rest of the world that we don't feel right. Brad, here's what it sounds like. Brad, why can't you slow down? Brad, can you speed up? Brad, why aren't you more excited? Brad, why aren't you less excited? Brad, can you just slow down a little bit so everybody else isn't uncomfortable? And Brad, how many times, I'll ask you the questions. How many times has your confusion been mistaken for anger?
Oh, many times. Yeah.
Or your frustration been responded to as though you attacked someone?
Mm-hmm.
See, we don't have the same feeling ability that the rest of the world does. Evolutionary hunters don't have time for that world of feelings. They're ambiguous. They're confusing. It's hard to talk about. And when somebody asks the freaking question, how are you feeling? And I know that it's like a pop quiz nobody ever prepared you for.
Exactly.
Right? And I've been put in front of that freaking sign so many times with the 24 faces on it that says, how are you feeling at the top? And it has happy, sad, frustrated, confused, angry. And I remember as a kid just defaulting to sleepy. So whoever it was that was in front of me would leave me alone. Because here's what we're really looking for, Brad. People like you and I are hardwired to go after one thing: momentum. We want to feel that moving forward. We want to feel progress. We want to be on the hunt and moving towards our kill. And momentum is one of those things that it's confusing until you understand it, because as we approach a goal, hasn't this happened to you every time, Brad? As you approach it, as you see the finish line, as it gets closer, it equivalently starts losing its importance to you.
Yep.
Because when hunters go on the hunt, as soon as we're going to make that kill, we're already on to the next one. It's the only way to hardwire our subpopulation, our subculture in this world so that this species survived. And so we are more driven. We do have more energy. We get judged as hyperactive and bipolar and ADD and ADHD and Asperger's and autistic and all this other bullshit that really just means you have the symptoms of every brilliant entrepreneur throughout history. I know because I've read them. I've read their lives. Einstein couldn't talk until he was 4. Beethoven couldn't hear the music that he was playing. Picasso's blue period is a period of bipolar manic depression that is also a period in art history. And so for people like us, once we understand what we're looking for is momentum, that outcome, that forward motion, everything changes. Because Brad, now that you've heard it, don't you know exactly what I mean by being in momentum?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does it feel like?
It feels like when you For me personally, I've experienced this when I can look in the rearview mirror, see something I accomplished, and all it does is makes me hungrier for that next thing.
And when you're in that feeling of momentum, when things are going your way, when you're accomplishing, when you're moving forward, what does it feel like, Brad?
Great. It feels phenomenal.
It's like being fully alive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just let's play that back. The evolutionary hunter feels most fully alive when they're in momentum on the hunt. Mm-hmm. Is this starting to make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's the second state. So let's forget about all the emotional words for a while. Let's just let ourselves off the hook and pretend like we never heard them except for in Disney movies. Because when you look at the three states in which the evolutionary hunter exists, life gets so much easier. The first one's in momentum. We just talked about it, and everyone listening knows what I'm talking about. It's that place where, well, I'll ask you, Brad, when you're in momentum, are you physically boosted, like you actually can do more?
Yeah, definitely.
Are you cognitively boosted, where you make better decisions, you can see the future more clearly, things get easier?
Yes.
And are you, here's the big one, chemically boosted, where you actually feel the chemical high of momentum propelling you forward?
Yeah, I would say that you just feel that kind of rush of excitement.
So, entrepreneurial personality types, people like you and I, when we're on the hunt, when we're in momentum, we are physically, cognitively, and chemically boosted. It's like the universe saying, go forward. We just don't realize it. We don't hook it up. We don't make these connections until far too late in life, where we say, oh crap, what I really was supposed to be doing is achieving just like I thought I should. That little voice in the back of my head that was always saying, you are more significant. There is more here. You can do more. You can be more. You can leave more behind. It was real. So I want everyone who's listening right now to understand that voice is not only real. If your mind is pregnant with the question, can I? Then the answer is fuck yes. Go.
Yes. Hell yeah.
So now the second state, Brad, here's the second state. This is where things get different for us. The second state is when we're facing resistance. Now, this is that place where the world has kind of conspired against us. Maybe we've conspired against ourselves. We don't have the resources, the time, the things that we need to move forward. But we can see that small light at the end of the tunnel. And everyone else in our lives is saying, it's a train. But we move forward. We pursue that light. We go towards it. We get in momentum anyway. And for Brad, for most of the people that I've ever worked with, that is exactly where, in fact, they defined their lives. Mm-hmm. So do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So people like us, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I can picture exact moments in my life where that is true.
It's because people like us, when we face resistance, when we're on the hunt, when things get hard, as long as we can see that outcome, we know what we're hunting, we see our prey, we go right back into momentum. Mm-hmm. Now there's this third state that we have to be careful of. It's when we're in full constraint. It's when we can't see the outcome. When we don't know the next steps to take, when we don't really have clarity about where we're going, when we feel as though we're stuck, plateaued, held in place, and cannot move forward. That feeling of constraint for an evolutionary hunter. Well, you tell me, Brad, have you been there?
I have.
What does it feel like?
It's terrible. I just think back to early career, shortly out of college, in a job that I did not like. I did not feel that there was a future. I didn't feel I could move forward and get into that momentum you're talking about. And you just feel defeated, deflated.
Yeah.
Unmotivated.
Yeah, like you're dying inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people like us, here's what happens. We get into this place of full constraint, and I want every one of you to hear this. We become symptomatic in the eyes of the rest of the world. We become disordered in the eyes of the rest of the world. We become disabled, handicapped. And if you're like us, if you've related to what I've said so far and you are in full constraint, if you get in front of the wrong person at the wrong time, you're going to pick up a label and a prescription that will turn you into an addict for the rest of your life just because you were experiencing constraint. Mm. And this gets me a little frustrated because throughout my career, I've watched some of the most talented people in the world be told that they were somehow broken or disabled or disordered or had a chemical imbalance in their brains that psychology has never been able to prove. And so they've taken some addictive substance that has a prescription label on it instead of a baggie around it, thinking that it's better. And the reality is that if you are in constraint and you create the outcome and you figure out what you can do next and you take the next few steps, you will go back on the hunt. And if you are stuck and feel like you can't move forward, reach out to someone who thinks like us and let them know, because the worst thing people like us do is isolate, stay alone, stop talking, pull back, and not connect with our tribe. But here's a warning. Connect with people like us, because everyone else in the world will try and stop you. Because within those factions of caretakers, communicators, and coordinators, there's a group within each one that wants to legislate, regulate, and red tape contract us out of existence. Because to them, if everything would just stay the same, things would get better. And for us, it's the opposite. So you can't allow yourself to be in full constraint. And you don't want to stay there for any period of time longer than you must. And there is a fast bridge out of it for people like us. Connect with a member of our tribe and tell them what's going on.
Yep.
The amazing thing is you will get momentum and you will give it to them. Because this edict that we have in the world today, this advice that people are getting, fake it until you make it, is such bullshit. It's really just lie and deny. And if you keep yourself lying and denying and you live in that denial and you don't tell people where you really are, the wrong people will show up in your life. You'll get the wrong advice. You won't find where you really want to go, and you will not get back into the momentum you can. But when people like us are willing to transparently and honestly tell others where we need the protection and support to move forward, that's exactly what we do.
That's a fascinating concept. And so the title of this podcast is Millennial Mastermind, not because I'm a mastermind by any stretch of the imagination, but because of the concept of mastermind groups. And that's kind of what I try to recreate with this show. And so are you a fan of that type of organization, mastermind groups? Because it sounds like a perfect kind of segue into finding that tribe that you're talking about that you can talk to pull your ass out of this state of full constraint.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. I actually, I run a program for entrepreneurs that have businesses over $1 million, typically under about 5 or 6 million. They're building that first team. They're creating the foundations of the company, and they're putting together the infrastructure that's going to get them to $10 million and beyond. And part of what I tell all of them is that the value in the group is not just their interaction with me, but their interaction with each other, because evolutionary hunters need our tribe. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make this as clear as I can. When you are part of the subpopulation that was hardwired to go out and kill shit, you are going to make other people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so just get over it and find people that you don't. Because far too many of us spend our lives trying to make people that are hardwired in the opposite way that we are feel comfortable with us, like us, be near us, and feel okay with us. You know what? Fuck it. Entrepreneurs are remembered throughout history for our accomplishments, but we are judged in our lifetimes for what we do and our behaviors. Nobody remembers that Einstein had every characteristic of an autistic person. Nobody remembers that Picasso spent years isolated other than a small team in depression painting. We remember what they did. We remember their accomplishments.
Yeah, my mind is just going a million directions because you're connecting with me at such a deep level.
I think that every one of us, everyone listening, me, Brad, we felt isolated, alone, confused, pushed off in a corner, backed into a corner, even like a party of one. Like there was no one else that was like us. Mm-hmm. And for all of you who felt that way, I want you to take that feeling and use it as the verification and the 100% confirmation that if right now you take the timeline of history that matters to you and you rise up the names of people who you remember that matter to be remembered. I know who they were for me. I remember when I first found out who Aristotle was, I thought somebody who asked questions just like I do. Einstein couldn't tie his shoes. Neither could I. Beethoven was deaf, and I knew that if he could do what he did, I could do something significant. Helen Keller couldn't see, talk, or hear and change the world for disabled people. Every one of them spoke to me. And for every one of you who's listening right now, you know the names that matter to you. I want you to think about them. Feel the feelings that wash over you as you picture those people and understand that they are just like us. And if you have felt isolated or alone or judged or cast aside, I want you to know that everyone in history who matters to be remembered, everyone in history you remembered, is just like you. And the fact is, you are part of the most important club in history. Because entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial personality types, we are the only consistent source of positive human evolution, and we always will be. So here's my plea with you. Take that thought in the back of your mind that has been saying you can and you should and you will, and go forward because you can and you should and you will. Because throughout history, people like us have showed up with the disorders, the disabilities, without the skills, without the senses, without the intelligence, without the everything that people say you need. And regardless of what diagnosis, disease, or issue you have, someone just like us has had it as well, overcome it, changed the world, and made their dent in the universe. So I want you to go forward, build a business, build an empire, because it's the only thing in human history that has changed things for the better. And if you look around yourself right now, everything in your life was brought to you by an entrepreneur.
Wow. Yeah, that is powerful, powerful stuff, Alex. Like, I'm just super grateful to have had the opportunity to have you on the show to share these thoughts and share this perspective that I'm sure is resonating with a lot of people listening to this episode right now. So if people want to learn more about this, I'm sure that they can go a lot deeper in this. Where can they find out more about these stages, about these types of people, about you? What are some resources that they can tap into?
So the best place to go is the Entrepreneurial Personality Type podcast. We made the decision about a month ago that we were going to put the most relevant content, the most important content that we have out on that podcast first. And there's a reason. It's a subscription base. So if you go there and subscribe, it'll tell you every time that a podcast is uploaded. And then we know that we're communicating directly with people in a way that they can listen when they want. And so that would be, I would say, the first step is to go subscribe to that podcast. And you can go to the URL momentumpodcast.com. And that's just an easy link because typing out entrepreneurial personality type podcast.com was painful, but go to Momentum Podcast and it'll give you iTunes, Google, or Stitcher. And if you do happen to listen and resonate, please leave us a review. That's how iTunes ranks podcasts, and we're doing everything we can to stay ranked.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thanks so much for tagging along today or joining us. Epic message that you had to share. So I'm sure we're going to be driving some people over to check out more of your episodes and more of the content that you're putting out there. So thank you very much.
Oh, Brad, it's my pleasure. And just one more, if you're somebody who likes to read instead of listen, it just occurred to me, let me give you also my book link. It's freemomentumbook.com. So we have Momentum Podcast and then Free Momentum Book. And, that is the Entrepreneurial Personality Type book. We've had thousands of people around the world read it. I'd love to have you read it. Understand yourself better, stop limiting behavior, and create unlimited momentum.